Cheers.
Cheers.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Unearth with Shelly Hughes podcast. I'm Shelly Hughes. I have Julia Barge here, our brand manager at Nolia Roots. And in this podcast, we really go over the good, the bad, and the ugly of growing a brand. We talk about mistakes, lessons learned, and some big wins from me personally growing this business from the roots up, and some of my colleagues as well that come on to the show and just what it takes to build a passionate, profitable brand. So, thanks, Julia.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. So, today we're going to be talking about our EFs, so our epic failures. So, each week, at the start of every week, we talk about some of the failures that we went through from the week prior. We also talk about some brags that we had, but we would really like to put an emphasis on, accepting some of the failures that we might have had from the previous week. So, sometimes they can be pretty big, sometimes they can be really small, like emailing the wrong person or, just maybe forgot to send something to someone. So it kind of ranges, but we really like to be really, think about those and talk about them without pushing them under the rug. So Shelly's done a really good job at, you know, letting us feel really comfortable in accepting those failures and not being scared to talk about them. So that's why it's something that we've become really comfortable as a team to, laugh about, figure out how to problem solve it, and then move forward from there. So I guess Shelly, even why do you think it's really important to talk about failures? Why do you start the EFs each week and why do we talk about them?
Yeah, I guess it goes back to my biggest failure in my career. I worked at different kinds of advertising agencies, different kinds of production companies, startups, and I always felt like you had to walk on eggshells
Mm-hmm.
because it was just a very competitive space. And so I would make mistakes and I would just cover them up because I was young, I was afraid. I saw other people kind of get a little bit lambasted when they made mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned into this thing where I, number one, hid my mistakes. I didn't learn from them. And I kind of overcompensated a bit because I knew I kept messing up and I just felt like no one else was messing up around me and there was something wrong with me. So that can certainly be a separate episode or even talk about today about, what my biggest mistake was. But when I launched this business and this agency, I just knew there had to be a better way to make people feel, number one, like they can make mistakes. We can learn from each other's mistakes. That I probably make the biggest mistakes every week out of all of us. And that we shouldn't be hiding from them because the faster we admit them, the faster we just all learn from them. So, what we do with the EF Awards is every week in our battle plan, every Monday, we get together, and the first thing we do is talk about our brag. Everyone goes around and talks about our brag from the week before and talks about our epic fail from the week before. And like you said, sometimes it is about I misplaced my car keys. Sometimes it's like, oh, I emailed the wrong client this thing and it did not go over very well. Usually mine is something like, I just something bigger that really truly impacts the business. And because I make mistakes all the time. And then at the end of that, we go over who we think had the biggest mistake from the week before, and that person gets $5 towards a cup of coffee. And I put it in place at Nolia Roots because I never wanted people to feel like they had to run away from their mistakes. And how I felt, back early in my career was that no one was making mistakes around me because no one admitted to them, no one talked about them, and it made me just feel really insecure and it also made me not want to take any risk. So I was very
Mm-hmm.
safe in everything I did. I never really thought outside of the box because I was afraid if I came with a dumb idea or if I thought outside of the box, did something really interesting and it didn't work out, then I would be looked at as the one person who failed. When in reality, everyone makes mistakes every single day. And so if you build a culture in your business where it's talked about, then number one, you those mistakes can be resolved very quickly. So we don't always wait until that Monday, right? Like, I want you
Mm-hmm.
guys to feel like you can come to me and say, "Hey, I emailed the wrong person. I sent this wrong invoice, whatever it is," and we can fix it quickly instead of you trying to scramble and fix it yourself. Um, and at the same time, we can learn from our mistakes. So if you said, "Hey Shelly, my mistake last week was, I invoiced the wrong client on this, and I'm kind of confused of Dubsado." Other people might also be confused of certain platforms that we use, and that mistake could be repeated by someone else if
Mm-hmm.
we don't talk all about it together. So I think it's just so multifaceted. And it's both kind of from a personal point of view and a group point of view that I want both, each of my employees to feel very confident in what they do every day and not be afraid to talk to me, to talk to each other. And it's just learning from each other and also knowing that typically I get those $5 towards a cup of coffee
Mm-hmm.
every week because my mistake was the biggest. It made the biggest impact. And I think that just shows that I'm not perfect in any way and I'm still learning. And it gives you guys a little bit more, trust in me that I will be understanding as a leader if something goes wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's really comforting to know that someone who is the like heartbeat of the company, someone who is our boss, our mentor, like you're the person that makes the biggest mistake. So it's nice to know that someone even who might be like above you in a way is able to make mistakes, accept them, and it's really important to do that because then like you said, it's you have to move forward and move onward, especially in what we knew, especially in what we do. The turnaround can be so fast that it's like, okay, like let's accept it and then we can move forward and problem solve. So that's the hugest thing definitely I see for us as a team is that we're just so easily able to communicate about those problems so that way we can not push it under the rug and be like, oh, a month from now we have to come back to the problem because it can snowball. So we've done a good job of being able to like each week just talk about it, problem solve, and move forward. So that's definitely helped with the culture of us as team members as well, for sure.
And it all goes back. My favorite book about business, about life is by Jocko Willink, and it's called Extreme Ownership. And
Mm-hmm.
that book changed my life. It changed the way I think about things. It also made me realize all the things that are so not done well in most businesses. And the concept of extreme ownership, which I try my darndest to practice every single day, and I really ask you guys to practice as well, is that if a mistake is made, whether it was your fingers or your brain that made that mistake, um, or if it wasn't you that made the mistake, always taking ownership of it, always taking the blame. I experience a lot of shaming and blaming at different companies that I worked on in the past,
Mm-hmm.
and it's it's very inefficient to get problem solved. And we
Mm-hmm.
have we have Irv right here who's gonna sniff the camera.
New
Hey buddy, come
guest.
here. Come here.
Or
So, oh, okay.
there we go.
There we go.
He can.
That's what you need.
Yep.
This is Irving.
I hope that got a good sound. Hey.
So he's good. So extreme ownership is all about leading up and down the chain. If one of you guys makes a mistake, I say, okay, what did I do to cause this mistake, right? I'm never going to say, oh, Julia like did this thing and I'm so annoyed she like totally effed up. I would never do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say, okay, did I not give her enough direction? Did I not lay out my expectations of what is considered, acceptable? Did I not, was I not around enough to support, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I want you guys to do that for me as well. If I make a mistake, I want to encourage you guys to say, okay, how could I have helped this mistake not happen? And so instead of me saying, oh my gosh, Julia like totally effed up and sent this invoice to a client and now they're pissed and whatever, that's not productive.
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So I really embrace this concept of extreme ownership because I think it just encompasses so much of what makes a great company culture and how we can just support each other as a team and not have that competitiveness that I've seen in a lot of other companies.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really hard, especially like personally for me to have extreme ownership. It's really hard to be like, oh man, like I messed up or I did this wrong, because I feel like it's can be like the end of the world when really it's not, and it's because you've set us up to not feel that way. So it's definitely taken me a while to be, you know, totally okay with like coming to someone and be like, hey, like I completely messed this up. Like, what do I do? But I think it at the end of the day it comes down to the leadership that we have that really, tells us that we don't have to feel that way. It doesn't have to be the end of the world, and we can just move forward. So yeah.
So I encourage if any business leaders are out there and they feel like they are constantly annoyed at their team, they're constantly thinking that they keep messing up or they're not being productive, kind of meditate on those thoughts a little bit and almost make them kind of not responsible for their actions. And how can you think about it? What do they need to succeed better in their position? Is it support? Is it better direction? Is it just better culture? And the really challenging thing that I've also seen in past businesses is there turns some people can turn very resentful to the leadership, to the company, because they never feel like they can win. They never feel like their voices are heard. There's sometimes very little autonomy and trust. And, that goes back to hiring, of course, as a leader. But I do encourage leaders to really think inward about who they are, what they are doing, and how they can simply take absolute ownership over everyone's mistakes around them up and down the chain. And in addition, if you want to make it more part of your culture to have mistakes more well known and more open to honestly the public, um, take a note from us and start the EF awards, every week. Have everyone in your team say, one brag from the week before and one epic fail from the week before. And spend that $5 a week and send them, a gift card for a cup of coffee because it really just celebrates that openness and that open communication so that everyone just feels like they can be confident in what they do every day.
And it makes it super relatable because then everyone in the room is like, oh, I wasn't the only one that messed, whatever the task was up. You're like, oh, like now I can relate to that other person because I've totally done that before. So it makes you feel a little bit more seen, like you have other peers and people to connect with over that. I feel like it allows the culture to be really relatable, which is so important. And I'm so happy to be a part of a community that we're able to talk about it and just be really open in our communication and knowing that like, hey, you're not going to get a slap on the wrist if you did something wrong. Like that's such a comforting thing to know.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, thank you for joining us. This was our first episode of the Unearth podcast, and I am glad to have my two guests on today. And yeah, I would love for you to follow along. I would love for you to follow my Instagram at Shelly Hughes underscore, and just take extreme ownership in everything that you do and know that people are leaning on you and needing your guidance and you know being the person to take the ownership that just allows them to feel that much more confident in you as a leader and the company as a whole. Thanks, Julia.
Yeah. Thank you, Shell.